Welcome to the strange and disturbing world of terror at Collinwood. 'Tis I, Penny Dreadful, and I am delighted to bring you today's episode, The Shadows Behind the Shadows, Addendum. I did 4 parts for The Shadows Behind the Shadows, but I'm doing one more to talk about some of the sources that may have inspired Dark Shadows storylines and ideas. But before I get to that, I have some news for you. First, don't forget that the Dark Shadows 60th anniversary event is happening July 31st through August 2nd in Los Angeles. You can get your tickets through Eventbrite. Get your tickets if you have not done so already. They are not available at the door, I am told. You have to buy them through Eventbrite. So if you're planning to just show up at the festival and buy tickets at the door, that's not a thing. So you got to get them in advance through Eventbrite. The link's in the show notes. Now, there are a few things I want to tell you about. First of all, Daytime Gothic 2 is now available for pre-order. It's actually at the printers, so put in your orders for Daytime Gothic 2. It is absolutely gorgeous. From the Dark Shadows news page, we are pleased to announce that our special charity fanzine, Daytime Gothic, is now at the printers and will be released on July 20th. You can click in the show notes through to the pre-order form and order your copy. Daytime Gothic is a full-color charity magazine celebrating 60 years of Dark Shadows with 160 pages of features, interviews, artwork, fiction, and humor, illustrated with rare and previously unseen photographs from the archives of Dan Curtis Productions. Highlights include Lara and Catherine, a wide-ranging interview by Catherine Lee Scott, conducted shortly before Lara's death in 2023, with special photography by James Storm and Valerie Pronio-Storm. Rare photos from Jonathan Frid's 1968 publicity tour. Oscar-winning screenwriter John Logan reveals everything he learned from watching Dark Shadows. The story of how a unique Dark Shadows behind-the-scenes film was discovered in the archives of the BBC, and there's much more in there. So head over to the Dark Shadows news page if you want a full breakdown, and click on through in the show notes to pre-order your copy of Daytime Gothic issue 2. I also want to let you know that Ansel Farage has been posting new episodes of Theatre Fantastique over at the Hollinsworth Productions YouTube channel. There are 4 episodes and they're great. There's Screening After Midnight, The City of Dreadful Night, The Werewolf of Venice, and Randolph Carter and the Silver Key. So head on over to the Hollinsworth Productions YouTube channel to check these out as they've been dropping in recent weeks. Catherine Lee Scott's new book, Reflections, A Life in Writing, is available on Amazon. Make sure to check that out, and also pre-order your copy of the Dark Shadows Legacy book, edited by Catherine Lee Scott and John Logan. And continuing on, Peter Mack of the Dark Shad Bros podcast has announced that he will have a new cabaret show called Barnabas and Me and My Dark Shadows, so keep an eye on Peter's social media so that you can be apprised of the performance dates for that. Artist Mark Maddox has announced on his Facebook page that he will be a guest at the Dark Shadows 60th Anniversary Festival. He will have a table there and he will have prints available for sale, so head on over to Mark's table. I'm sure he'll have several Dark Shadows prints available. Of course, he painted the cover of the new Dark Shadows Legacy book. He painted the Dark Shadows lunchbox artwork, the Running Home to Shadows cover. I mean, he's done loads of classic horror, science fiction, and fantasy artwork that is magnificent, so head on over to his table and say hello and pick up some cool prints. And last but not least, if you watch the podcast on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and like the videos. That would definitely help me out. And according to the YouTube analytics, more than half of the people who listen to the podcast on YouTube are not subscribed to the podcast. It's non-subscribers listening. If you don't mind, I would appreciate if you just click on that subscribe button on YouTube there. And without further ado, let's get to the show.
Twinge of fear and tears that glisten. There are spoilers here for those who listen.
Now, the reason I'm doing this addendum episode is because even though I did 4 installments of The Shadows Behind the Shadows, where I looked at the literary, cinematic, theatrical, television, folkloric, etc. Inspirations for Dark Shadows storylines and moments, I received several emails and messages from people pointing out some things that either may have been inspirations for Dark Shadow storylines, or in the case of this first one here, I think definitely was. So this one I was aware of because I had seen a reference to it. I think it was in Danny Horn's comments in his blog that people left comments, and I completely forgot about it when I was talking about the lottery storyline. So of course, Shirley Jackson's The Lottery is an essential part of that. That is the inspiration for the lottery aspect of it. However, the lottery room itself, the haunted, cursed lottery room, was inspired by a different story, and I was reminded of it by Deadly Kingdom on YouTube, and thank you very much, Deadly Kingdom, for... I can't believe I spaced on this because I was aware of it and I forgot to mention it. Deadly Kingdom says, "Great stuff, Penny. Just to add an obscure one, I suggest that the lottery room owes something to Margaret Oliphant's 1876 novella, The Secret Chamber. In this story, each heir, on coming of age, must spend a night in the hidden room, where he undergoes an ordeal. He emerges in the morning broken mentally and physically. Some die soon afterward. The root of the evil is an ancestor who practiced alchemy and mesmerism. He still haunts the room, hoping to corrupt his descendants for some cryptic purpose. His influence wrecks the family's influence and finances. Oliphant seems to have taken her idea from Glamis Castle. Until Dark Shadows got me poking into this, I only knew Glamis from Macbeth. Apparently it has a long history of assorted ghost stories, including one about a secret room. It's mentioned in print at least as far back as 1791, crops up briefly in Charles Dickens' magazine all the year round in 1880. So I am sure that The Secret Chamber by Margaret Oliphant was the inspiration for that cursed haunted lottery room, and Oliphant herself was most likely inspired by Glamis Castle. Totally agree. And I've read the story and I just totally spaced on it when I knew that was going to happen when I did those episodes. I was trying to be as thorough as possible, but you know, it happens. So hopefully people will hear this one and go seek out The Secret Chamber. Steve Sullivan also sent a message pointing out another source that I'm guessing was inspired by The Secret Chamber. Steve says, "It occurred to me while you were talking about the lottery storyline that the sequence is also inspired by the Blue Room Mysteries, a story made and then remade twice by Universal. I think the first is The Mystery in the Blue Room, but that's from memory. In it, there is a haunted room in an old mansion where people have allegedly died after spending the night. A group of young disbelieving heirs agrees to each spend the night in the room to disprove the legend. But of course, one dies, one disappears, and then, well, that would be telling. If I remember correctly, Lionel Atwill is in the first one. The remakes aren't as good, but one of them is actually musical. Anyway, the deadly haunted room of the lottery storyline seems a pretty direct inspiration from those films. So they may have watched the Blue Room Mysteries on Dark Shadows, but I'm guessing it's Oliphant's Secret Chamber story that inspired the film and also the Dark Shadows writers. I'm fairly certain that's the case. And then Steve goes on to add another inspiration film might be The She Creature or the remake Creatures of Destruction, where a woman gains psychic powers under hypnosis, and her spirit is time regressed to create a monster, which Dark Shadows didn't use as far as I remember. The Unholy also has past life regression, but not psychic powers, I don't think. Thank you very much, Steve Sullivan, for writing in with that. Now, moving on, Raymond Castile of Raymond Castile's Basement of Horror wrote in, and Ray says, I think there are Lovecraftian elements in 1995. The travel to a seaside town where there is a dark secret that everyone seems to be in on, but no one will speak of. It seems like a curse on the town. As they investigate, people clam up and try to convince them to stop. The secret involves an ancient evil with the power to corrupt people. Sounds Lovecraftian to me. Me too, Ray. I think you got it there. And I think at around that time, I think like I said before, I think Lovecraft was in the air there and M.R. James too at around this period, 1970-ish period of Dark Shadows. So because they had come off the Leviathans, so they had read Lovecraft for the Leviathans. Then as they went into 1995, I could see that still those echoes of Lovecraft were still present, so they worked some of that kind of Innsmouth kind of vibe into the 1995 storyline. So maybe not a specific Lovecraft story. I mean, I called out Shadow over Innsmouth, but just the Lovecraft vibe of that definitely fits. So good call there. Cosmo 13 from the classic horror film board added several things here. Cosmo says, excellent analysis of this latter Dark Shadows period. Thank you, Cosmo. One overlooked possible influence on the visual imagery of the 1840 storyline is the 1943 movie, The Mysterious Doctor. Though I don't have access to a photo of Norman Parker as the headless body of Judah Zachary wandering through the woods near Collinwood, I'm remembering that character being patterned after the headless body wandering through the woods in The Mysterious Doctor. And just a quick summary here of The Mysterious Doctor. In a Cornish village during World War II, a German Nazi uses the disguise of a headless ghost to strike fear in the local tin mine workers. There is certainly a resemblance with this headless body walking through the foggy moors. Definite possibility, I would say, on that one. Definite possibility. Of course, the headless body, the headless ghost folklore goes way back. You can talk about the Dullahan from Irish folklore, to basically a headless horseman, and the headless horseman himself. Of course, there's no horse involved here in the show, although the headless body of Judah Zachary does bear some resemblance to the headless horseman because he has the cape, that 17th century kind of tunic with the cape kind of gives that vibe. But yes, Mysterious Doctor, good call. And he goes on to say, could the Ghost of Joanna Mills' revenge storyline have been inspired by the 1960 Burt I. Gordon movie, Tormented? Joanna Mills is the ex-girlfriend who gets pushed off a cliff to her death by her ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend. The ghost of Joanna returns to gain revenge on her killer. In Tormented, the jilted ex-girlfriend falls to her death from a lighthouse, while the ex-boyfriend who jilted her coldly decides not to even try to prevent her from falling. The ex-girlfriend's ghost returns to torment the ex-boyfriend and get revenge for his heartless treatment of her. Maybe so. I wouldn't put money on that one, but I would say maybe. Cosmo goes on to say, the 1995 flash forward initially made me think of the October 1967 Flight into the Future episode of Lost in Space. Dr. Smith, Will, and the robot believe they've traveled into the future, discovering the wreckage of their spaceship home amidst a bleak, desolate planetscape. They believe they will never again see their family and friends. This all turns out to be an illusion created by a computer. I'm wondering if the concept behind the episode might have inspired Dan Curtis to tell his writers to send Dark Shadows protagonists into the future and find the wreckage of their home in a bleak, depressing environment. Perhaps the idea was even inspired by Planet of the Apes. No simians on Dark Shadows, but the Planet of the Apes astronauts travel into the future, and Taylor eventually finds the destroyed wreckage of human civilization. The plot was already recycled somewhat in the 1956 science fiction film World Without End, also sans simians. So, maybe. We also have to give Dan Curtis and the Dark Shadows writers credit for coming up with a lot of their own ideas, too. Like, not every single idea in Dark Shadows was lifted from something else. And maybe the general concept, it's not a stretch, given that they've gone into the past several times and into a parallel universe, that they could go into the future. And in Dark Shadows, of course, it's going to be something horrible that happened in the future. But maybe it was inspired by these sources here that you call out, Cosmo, or it might have just been, hey, let's go to the future and Collinwood's destroyed. The general concept of sort of a dystopian future, where everything has been destroyed, what happened here. And then Cosmo goes on to say, another then recent influence on 1841 parallel time is Love Story. Daphne's lingering deathbed demise was patterned after Ally McGraw's death in the hit 1970 movie. The lovely young woman with long dark hair festooned attractively against her pillow, while her concerned beloved sits by her bedside, was imagery copied from Love Story. Good call there. And he sent some pictures here to Ally McGraw and Daphne in parallel time, and they do look very similar. Roger Ebert described this trope as Ally McGraw's disease, a movie illness in which the only symptom is that the sufferer grows more beautiful as death approaches. And then he continues on, the possessed Quentin plot from Night of Dark Shadows can certainly be traced to the haunted palace as cited. Perhaps Dan Curtis was more immediately inspired by Strange Paradise. The other supernatural soap opera was airing at 3 p.m. on Channel 5 in New York in 1969 and 1970. Throughout the series, the protagonist was periodically possessed by his wicked, libidinous ancestor's spirit, just as the movie Quentin was possessed by his wicked, libidinous ancestor's spirit. I'm told Curtis had one or more of his minions monitoring Strange Paradise. And then Cosmo goes on, the central family on Strange Paradise was the Desmond family living during the final 26 weeks of the show in Desmond Hall near Desmondton. The monster kids in my grade school got a good laugh when the Dark Shadows 1840 storyline introduced a character named Desmond Collins. We figured they were acknowledging Strange Paradise, and that the series might reciprocate by naming a character Collins Desmond. That would have been really cool if that had happened. I mean, several of the people who worked on Dark Shadows did work on Strange Paradise. Robert Costello, Ron Sproat, Joe Caldwell. So that probably would have happened eventually, some reference. He adds, I like the theory about Ghost Quentin's attempted murder of Chris Jennings. Yes, Quentin may not have known the consequences of killing a werewolf in its human form. As you say, Quentin was not a werewolf very long. Maybe he didn't have time to read the werewolf handbook and familiarize himself with the union bylaws. Speaking of, there's a new trailer that just dropped for Robert Eggers' upcoming werewolf film. So that looks pretty cool, actually. Getting vibes of Eggers' The Witch from that one. So I'll probably go check that out when that comes out. And then the last message I have here, Dominique Lamses writes, okay, catching up on terror at Collinwood and listening to The Shadows Behind the Shadows Part 3. And I wanted to say, I read the manuscript found in Saragossa. Now, obviously, it was in translation. I read Ian MacLean's 1996 translation, but the way the language is used and the jokes that are made and how things are said so gloriously, flippantly, is 100% Patofi. I heard Thayer David saying a lot of the jokes in that book. I mean, Count Pataki may have inspired Count Patofi. That was one of the sources I talked about in, I think, part 3. So maybe even some of the language was lifted from that in terms of Violet Wells' crafting of the Patofi character. So who's to say? The only Dark Shadows writer left alive is Joe Caldwell, and he was not on the show anymore at that point, although he did come back to the show for a while. I'd love to interview Joe Caldwell, by the way. He's in his 90s. I don't know if he'd be able to do it, but Joe Caldwell, if you're listening, I'd love to talk to you. So anyway, thank you very much to everyone who wrote in. I am not going to do another addendum for these. If you have other ideas, please do feel free to post them online in the YouTube comments or on Classic Horror Film Board or on Facebook or wherever you like to post them. But I am not planning to do another one of these episodes. This is just a little addendum I wanted to add because I did get several messages, and especially The Secret Chamber, which was one that just really slipped through the cracks. The Secret Chamber was one I definitely wanted to include, and I totally spaced on that one. So thank you again to Deadly Kingdom and to everybody who wrote in. And stay tuned. The next episode, I know I said this episode was going to be the Rich Hanley and Aaliyah Shockley episode to talk about the Collins Family album. I am working on that one right now, and that will be out very soon. So that should be episode 135, I think. So stick around for that one within the next week. And if you want to help out the podcast and show your support, you can drop a few bucks over at Buy Me a Coffee. I would certainly appreciate it. Or you can pick up a Terror at Collinwood shirt or other item over at the T Public Shop. So links to both of those are always in the show notes. It's a nice way to help out the podcast. And hey, if you're at the 60th anniversary event and you're wearing a Terror at Collinwood shirt, you're gonna get a sticker. You're gonna get a Terror at maybe we'll get more than one Terror at Collinwood sticker. Depends how many I have left by the time I see you. If I see you wearing a shirt, I'm gonna make a beeline for you, and I will slap a Terror at Collinwood sticker into your hand right there, right in front of everybody, or maybe just on the sly, like, hey, I got something for you, come here. Anyway, thank you very much for listening, and stay tuned for the Collins Family album episode coming very soon.
Terror at Collinwood was a Penny Dreadful production.